My fruities. Prince Harry's memoir is said to have been completed very recently in the last few weeks and signed off by his legal teams. Intriguing. But yet again, our second-hand prince finds himself in second position, in runner-up position, and this has really got to be sticking in his craw because one of his heroes, darling Michelle Obama, the beloved becoming Mrs. Obama, has usurped him. And her tome is going to be released on the 15th of November via the same publishers, Penguin Random House. So it's certainly not going to harm the publishers themselves. They know what they're doing and they'll schedule things accordingly. But yet again, Harry was hoping his release was going to be the most hotly anticipated of the season. And yet again, it ain't, because Becoming was one of the best-selling tomes in history, in the history of the publishing world. So this sequel, The Light We Carry, will be bound to shoot straight to the #1 spot all over the world. And you have to understand, in publishing, it is vital for a release like Harry's, with all that, you know, that advance of $20 million or whatever it was, 20 million smackers. They're going to want their bang for the buck, and they're going to want New York Times to have it #1 on that best-selling list. So they've got their work cut out timing-wise. My hunch, my intuition is that they would be best to get it out there between mid-September and mid-October so that it really avoids any direct clash with Mrs. Obama. And if not, they'll have to wait till next year if they want a #1 position. And as I intimated to you before from my sources in the publishing world, certainly the original plan was to prop up this release with an orchestrated campaign of publicity around their Spotifications, Netflixings, all that kind of merching, my dear. That was absolutely the original plan. But as you saw yourself over the last few months, we got the demise of Pearl, we got the demand for them going down. They've been working hard behind the scenes, apparently, at getting all of these productions together. But nothing's been presented to the world, has it? And it doesn't seem that anything is ready or running to any of their original schedules. So what are the publishers to do if they want to get it out there for Christmas? Do they really want to bide their time and wait another year when they will have no idea what's going on in the Harkle world, how their popularity might wane or rise within that time? Or do they want to strike while the iron is lukewarm? Reports say that the royal family have been given no advance copy. Their legal teams have not been given advance copy to look over anything, which indicates that the Harkle's lawyers don't feel that there's anything approaching defamation or libelous extracts, this kind of thing, within the pages, because it is at least it is convention. It is convention to provide people who might be defamed in writing. You know, it is convention to approach them and give them a right to reply in advance of publication. There have been some security breaches at the Casa. How scary. Security breaches. 2 intruders in 12 days tried to break in. This was on May the 19th, 5:44 in the afternoon, and on May the 31st, which is when they were preparing to go, or maybe they had flown, I can't remember, for the Jubilee weekend. That was at 3:21 in the afternoon. So alarms triggered, and the police logged trespassers, property crimes, and suspicious circumstances, with no further details given. Well, after all that security detail and the millions and squillions that they spend on the security, apparently there have been 6 security alert calls made to this home in the past 14 months. Are they sleeping on the job over there? Are they on their mobile phones, swiping on dating applications, all of these security guards? How are they managing to trespass? Because surely they've got security cameras all over the place. How can they not identify these people and find out who they are? Were they press? Were they journalists? Were they stalkers? What kind of interlopers were they? It just surprises me that they go to all these lengths to protect themselves, and the local police end up having to deal with it with seemingly rather little input from their own security staff. It seems a little bit Wouldn't you love it if they found footage, grainy CCTV footage of Mr. Markle and Carl Larson amongst the foliage with a camera? The Queen arrived at Balmoral recently and she'll be staying on the estate for 10 weeks. So as usual, she's spending the summer there. The press made something of the fact that she invited Harry and Meghan over to Balmoral. I don't know whether or not that's true. Sources say that they did, and then sources say that that's sophistry and that an invitation wasn't extended. All I can say is that it's nothing unusual for her to extend an offer of stay over the summer to every member of the royal family. You know, she's there for a long time, and it's the perfect period during the year for people to come across and munch a few cucumber sandwiches with her, take their Tupperware boxes out on the estate and have a few picnics. Fiona Fitzgerald says, is it me or does Miss M represent new money and Harry old money? And the tacky is winning over class. Tacky is winning everywhere, all around the globe. The age of class, elegance and refinement is done, and I don't see it ever returning. Because years and centuries of culture that seem to culminate last century have been evaporating in coincidence with the internet, it has to be said, and with the age of social media, in my opinion. That heralded the end of culture. I have seen the difference myself between old money families and new money. Well, as I've said before, I love old money and new money. I love every kind of money, my dear. So I have no disparagement, actually, towards new money, and I think they get a bit of a hard rap. Old money families tend to be more private about their affairs and purchases. That's possibly true. Whereas new money wants to throw it in your face as a trophy. A poor person has more class than Miss M. A poor person will share their last dollar because they understand the need. Well, I understand your sentiments, and sometimes I feel the same way as you, my dear, but with the breadth of experience of all types in my life, as I'm sure you've had as well, I do find there to be good old money and bad old money, and good new money and bad new money. So I think some of my original prejudices have changed. But what's certainly true is that Meghan does indeed certainly represent everything that is hideous about new money. Everything that is hideous about it. You say a poor person will share their last dollar because they understand the need. Well, I'm sure Meghan has shared many a dollar or many a sandwich pail with the poor and the needy and the sick. But she always has to have a photographer with her, doesn't she, my dear? Or she always has to report it back to the TIG or one of her outposts. She always has to make sure that it is an act lacking altruism. And again, on your point about tacky winning over class, and my point that it coincides with the age of the social media, what's very much wrapped up in this age of the social media is the elements of narcissism. Narcissism in a person doesn't mean that they have NPD. You know, everybody has an element, a pinch of everything. And a pinch of this and a pinch of that only seasons the meal. But social media exacerbates the elements of narcissism that we all have. And it's important to be very conscious of them, because they can spin out of control. When I speak to some of the senior members of my family, they tell me of a time when the thought, the very prospect of sharing the contents of your album, because it wasn't so long ago when photographs were always a physical item that families had in albums that you kept at home and shared with friends and relations when they came over. Of course, if you were from a family with elements of public life, you would select and choose the odd photograph to publish in the local newspapers or national ones. But photography was such a private thing, and the thought of, when the internet first bloomed, the thought of having an image of your own or your families or your children was scandalous, or it was considered a violation of one's intimate recollections And we're only going back a couple of decades here. It's only over the last 10, 20 years that people have gotten used to the idea of sharing absolutely everything. A friend of my relations put a photograph of their stillborn child on Facebook. The world is changing so rapidly. Fashions come and go so rapidly. What's cool, what's not, what's acceptable, what's politically correct changes almost on a daily basis, it seems. And it's throwing a state of confusion over every class, including the upper classes and aristocracy. But while status isn't available to all, class has always been available to absolutely everybody, as you say, my dear. Class is available to all. Sadly, the standards of class have slipped drastically since the last century, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to find people who can uphold the standards of what it means to be truly classy. And much of society is being persuaded and warped into this twist version of what's classy. Those who think that the Harkles are a class act, for example, well, for a start, you're gravely mistaken, my dears. There is nothing classy about their exit. We're all only human, but it is the way that you deal with things that gives you class. It is knowing when to be silent and when to speak out. It is knowing when to make a stand, how to make a stand, and how to do it without washing your dirty linen in public and stringing every other member of your family and your monarchy and your nation out to dry, just because it makes you feel that you have some kind of righteous point to make and something that you want to share about the world, about your personal journey. That is so classless, tacky and vulgar. So Fiona dear, I wouldn't go so far as to say that they represent new money, because I think that's entirely fair to all the extremely wealthy members of the new money set that I've known and loved over the years. So, but I do think I agree with what you're getting at, which is that they represent all that's bad and vulgar and gauche and childish about new money. A couple of comments regarding Princess Anne. Bernadette said, River, you hit the nail firmly on the head when you mentioned all the unsung work done by Princess Anne and the royal family that never hits the news. Obviously the Claw assumed that it was going to be a doddle because she'd have to do only premieres, etc., all the glam stuff. Meet the citizens, the poor downtrodden masses. Oh, my dear, no, not worth getting out of bed for, unless there's cameras there. We are so well rid of her. 3 cheers for Harry for taking the trash out. Yeah, love it when the trash takes itself out, don't we, my dears? The other comment was Patricia Hughes. I love Princess Anne, and I've loved and admired her since I was a little girl. She's been an excellent example of a strong, progressive woman all her life, following in her mother's footsteps. It's a pity young women don't have real heroes and heroines anymore. Yes, you know, I really was delighted by a photograph that I shared in the last video, but it really struck me when I saw it of Princess Anne at her meeting with those with motor neurone disease recently. It was the expression on her face, the moment shared between her and the chap that she was talking to. That absolute, genuine, joyous relationship between the two of them in that encounter, you know, something that cannot be faked, something that looks entirely authentic. It's just the kind of expression with the millions and millions of grins and smiles that the Markle girl gives us, and the hugs with the poor and the handouts and the visits to people that, you know, I will say, you know, she will help out with the odd donation here, there and everywhere. I won't take that away from her. But there's just an authenticity in that look of Anne's that you will just never see in the Markle girl, will you? It's a sort of authenticity that, as you say, suggest in your comments, comes from decades of truly giving herself, giving of herself to an institution, to all these hundreds of engagements that she does a year, thousands upon thousands during her lifetime, most of which bore her to tears, I would imagine. But you know, she represents the absolute opposite of Meghan and Harry's childish, petulant, truculent impatience to get out of all this boring stuff and think that they can try and reinvent the wheel, think that they can bring a value to the Commonwealth and the institution and the world. The royal family never can. No, the real value, the real joy, It comes in the depth of the relationships formed with when you're a patron of these kind of organisations for decades, and you get to know them and weave life's tapestry. You're not just some kind of dilettante like the Meghan girl, hopping from the latest cause in vogue to the next cause in vogue. And it's a shame that it just wouldn't have occurred to those two while they were going through all their pains and angst while here in the kingdom and deciding whether or not to fly the nest if it wasn't already decided. That they couldn't just take stock for a moment, step back, stop panicking about all these so-called negative press articles about them, stop trawling social media to see what the trolls are saying about them, getting their knickers in a twist for absolutely no reason and accusing people of racism that didn't exist and wasn't there. What they could have done is looked to the more senior, older members of the family that have given their life in similar service and used it as a template for their own offering. To draw wisdom from those who have been there, seen it and done it, not go for advice to talk show hosts and actors and the Hollywood elite and publicists and your agents in Los Angeles, who I'm sure are absolute mavericks at doing their job with their starlets and wannabes and actors and actresses, because that's their forte. But they're Hollywood royalty, not actual royalty. I've noticed some parallels being drawn between Martin Bashir and his unruly whispers in the ear of fair Diana, and guess who? Meghan. And I've got to say, I find some rather interesting parallels there between the way that Bashir whispered in Diana's ear and the way that Marcolina was an earworm in Diana's son's ear, in poor Harry's ear. Well, not so poor. He was a willing participant, wasn't he? A willing victim of that Harry whisperer. Sheila M.S. Diana completely untwisted my knickers when she did the Bashir interview. As a divorced mother who raised my kids solo till I remarried 12 years later, my cardinal rule was to never ever speak ill of my ex-husband. The girls were free to form their own relationship with him and found out for themselves that he has some good points but could be a complete idiot as well. When Diana went on worldwide TV and ripped Chaz apart, my opinion of her went from up there to down there. You never criticise the other parent. I was sure their boys would be mortified, and they were. Just the worst thing she could have done. And a similar comment was from Patricia Livingston. Princess Diana said during that Martin Bashir interview, the best way to control someone is to isolate them. This is what MM has done with Prince Harry. Patricia Livingston, congratulations, you're bang on the money. Well, I think you've got a good point, a really good point. Because when I look back at her effect on Harry and the sort of insidious nature of the whispers in his ear, the absolute power she has over him to control his way of thinking and shape the narrative, he comes across as a prince who is completely subjugated to her. Completely subjugated to her will, as if he wasn't capable of forming a thought for himself at all. Everything she says goes. Everything through that famous lens of hers alters the way that he previously saw the world, but he seems to be oh so willing to be strung along with this charade. Earl Spencer wrote in the Daily Mail this week, in the wake of Martin Bashir, the Panorama scandal, the £200,000 that was awarded to Tiggy Leg Burke, Prince Harry's nanny, and I believe godmother to Archie. She's been compensated £200,000 because of the storyline given by the BBC during the time of that interview. Lies that she was carrying Prince Charles's child while he was married to Diana and had an abortion. And these were lies that were fed to Diana. I'm sure you've heard about all of this and all the various lies that she was fed. Outrageous lies. And this is the woman who was already extremely paranoid. This was a woman who was already extremely disturbed in so many ways. And she was preyed upon by these vultures at the BBC. I mean, it's hard to believe how far they went. And Earl Spencer wrote about this week. He spoke about how he was contacted by Martin Bashir originally and met with him and was astounded to hear all these rumours that were substantiated with faked documents. And he said that he contacted Diana and he said, I've got to tell you about this Martin Bashir. You've got to meet up with him. And they met up with Martin Bashir. But after that meeting with the three of them, Charles, Earl Spencer, Diana and Bashir, he said, oh, I'm sorry, I wasted your time because as Mr. Bashir was talking, he was changing his story from the last time I spoke to him. So he said, I'm sorry for wasting your time. He seemed to smell a rat even back then. But Diana ignored him. She had been hooked onto whatever it was that Bashir was selling her. And the next thing that Earl Spencer knew about it, it was too late. The interview was in the can. And as we all know, that interview had a huge effect on the monarchy, on the royal family, on Charles, on the children, everything. And it was all based on so many lies. The difference with Meghan, and what makes it altogether more sort of Machiavellian and clever in a way, is that she's not dealing with faked statements and documents and feeding him outright lies. Well, I hesitate to use that. Depends what you want to call a lie. Do you call her truth a lie or not? Well, I know what I think and I know what most of you think. But, you can't pin it down as an actual indisputable lie because she's too clever for that. And because, if she thinks something to be true, then who are you to say that it's not true? If she says that she was married in a small garden before the actual marriage in Windsor took place, then who are you to say it's not? If whoever blessed this little congregation says it was a marriage and she and Harry think it was a marriage, then who are you? Who's the Lord Jesus Christ and God above to say when they got married? If Prince Charles asked, oh, what colour do you think your kid's going to be? Or if Camilla made some comment about, oh, do you reckon the two of you will produce a ginger afro? Who are you to say that's not racist? Meghan is the woman of colour, so if they decide that something that they said was racist and offensive, when it wasn't, then who is everybody else to say? It can't be pinned down in that same way that Martin Bashir could with his fake documents. But regardless whether or not we think that there is much to be drawn in comparison with Bashir and Markle, what is certainly true, in my opinion, is what you say when you mention that Diana had said the best way to control someone is to isolate them when Diana made that point. What Diana wasn't aware of at the time, what she was blissfully ignorant of, was the fact that Bashir himself was the one that was doing the isolating. They were exacerbating that isolation. And as an observer, it certainly seems that that was the Markle modus operandi. That was the technique she used. Isolate, isolate, isolate from the moment she got her feet under the table. I've always held Harry just as much responsible for allowing herself to run roughshod over him and the family. But there's no doubt whatsoever that we're dealing with a very clever operator, in my humble view, who can make herself look, act and smile very much like the innocent flower, very much. But she be the serpent underneath, always seeking out opportunities to isolate him from his loved ones in the way that she isolated herself from hers. And I don't blame her for isolating herself from her ragtag family, because I think they're absolutely dreadful. But Harry's family were not her family. Harry's family, though they had their faults, had never betrayed Harry in the way that she might have been betrayed by members of her family. And it boils my piss that she used the dynamics of her own family dilemmas as a blueprint to duplicate in regards to Harry's poor family, who didn't deserve the damage that he has wreaked over the last few years. Okay, there's quite enough nonsense from me, isn't it, my fruits? I'll see you in the next broadcast, and I thank you kindly for joining me. My tip jar is in the description box below. See you next time, and toodle pip.